Hey guys, Dan here. This is the review of the Simucube 2 Active Pedals. They are freaking amazing. You should all go and buy them. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one. Okay, all jokes aside, today we're going to have a look in detail at the Simucube 2 Active Pedals. I hope the video will not be insanely long, but this is such a powerful pedal set with so many features. I'll try to keep things as short as possible, but please forgive me if this will be a longer video. So as usual, the disclaimer first. Simucube provided a 2 pedal set for review, and the deal is I can keep 1 pedal for free, and I can buy the second for a discounted price that I did after like 4 hours of testing. But as usual, Simucube does not get to see the script or the video before it's being posted, and all the opinions are my own. They explicitly mentioned they are interested in feedback and want to have a review as honest as possible. I mean, my reviews, if you watch the channel, you know it. I always try to cover everything that I like, that I dislike. But yeah, with that out of the way, let's have a closer look. So the pedals are insanely expensive. 1 pedal is 2,378 euros. Including taxes. The 2 pedal set is 4,388. The 3 pedal set is 6,339. A lot of money, but if it doesn't hurt you too much financially to buy these, I can highly recommend getting these. Actually, when they announced the pedal set, I think I tweeted at them that they should maybe offer a bundle with a passive throttle to keep the price a bit lower, maybe below 3K, and that's actually what they just announced. There will be a Simucube passive throttle. Looks very good from the pictures. I haven't tested it yet, but you can buy that throttle to combine it with a brake, for example, for 334 euros. And then you can also add the Simucube base plate for 190 euros. All the prices are including taxes, but I think a combo with a throttle and a brake at around 3,000 euros, it's still a lot of money, but it probably doesn't hurt as much as spending like over 6 grand on a 3 pedal set. So I think that is a very smart move if the throttle is actually good, which I assume it will be. So this definitely is the most expensive pedal set that I have ever tested, but it's also by far the best pedal set that I've ever used here on the channel. And it will be so hard to go back to conventional pedals now that I'm used to this. But once we are in the rig, I'll tell you everything why this is so good and what features it has, and hopefully everything that you want to know about these. So on the desk, I have only 1 pedal here, but they are all the same. Whether it's being used as the throttle, brake, or clutch, you can configure that in the software, so they all look the same. And it is freaking huge. The dimensions are 100 in width, 250 height, and the depth is 402 millimeters. So you definitely will have to check if this can fit your rig. I had to move my rig away from the wall a little bit because, I mean, a normal pedal, like for example, the Simtrax throttle here, you can see it's basically more than twice the depth. So you need to make sure you have space for it. I don't think the pedal deck needs to be able to support all 6 screws that they offer here. I just mounted it with 4 screws. That has been fine, but just keep in mind it takes some place, and also the cables in the back are not right angled. They protrude a little bit, so you will even need more space, but I think it's worth it in the end. But just keep in mind, if you are tight on space, these are huge. They're also pretty heavy, which is nice because you can just get a nice workout by lifting it. And yeah, they are 6 kilograms, especially if you get 3 of those mounted to the base plate and then try to put it on the rig. That will be a nice exercise, but I guess exercise is always good, so yeah. So the pedals do consist mainly of 4 parts. We have the pedal arm that looks a little bit weird because we have that servo motor in the middle, so we need that slight U-shape here in the bottom to make space for that. And the pedal face on top. I do think the pedal faces could be a little bit bigger. For example, for the throttle, I think the pedal face they have on that passive throttle looks very good. I personally use these SimCore pedal faces. Can highly recommend them. They're actually not very expensive. I'll put a link down in the description. I use this for the throttle, and SimCore also has a brake pedal face that is a little bit bigger than this. I do think that these are fine, but I prefer the SimCore ones, especially when driving with socks, because you just have a bigger surface for your foot to rest on, and especially if you use higher forces, it's just more comfortable. So the SimCore pedal plates, very, very nice addition to this. I'll leave the link down below if you want to get these. They are also available in different colors and also adapt to many other pedals. So for example, if you pair a brake pedal with a passive throttle, it can lead to a little less triggering of OCD if at least the pedal faces match. But yeah, these are great. I will also show you like how to install it. Very easy. There are 2 screws in the back that you have to remove. Torx screws being used here, by the way, very nice. A nice little detail, there are these little spring balls or something here that make the pedal face sit in a few predetermined positions. You don't have to use that, but I thought that was a very cool detail. It's not available on the SimCore plates, but yeah, overall, this is a good pedal face. I just prefer the ones from SimCore. Before we screw it back on, you can see here that there are 2 screws that you can loosen. Well, 2 screws per side, so 4 in total. So loosen these and then you can adjust the angle of the pedal face in this direction. I think the default one is fine, so I have just left it in this position. But if you want to go for a different angle, this is where you adjust it. So let's install this. Actually, you have to be a little bit careful with the screws here because there's not a lot of space with that arm here. I just hurt myself a little. Sim racing injuries. All right, the SimCore face is on. I think it looks a bit better as well. Looks more like a throttle pedal, but yeah, like I said, this is also fine. Then the next part of the pedals is basically a little Simucube in the front here. Looks like a Simucube, just a very, very small version of it. I don't know the maximum torque this thing can put out, but you have pedal pressures available, I think up to 150 kilograms or so. We'll have a look in the software later. This will be fine for everyone, but what this is doing is it creates the resistance and the effects that you can get with these pedals. This little Simucube servo motor is connected to a rod inside here. You can see it here in the bottom, and then there's this assembly that slides on top of the rod. You can see it very well how it works on the homepage, so I did not open this up, but I think we all get the idea how this works. Then the last part is this little orange rod here that connects the pedal arm to the assembly that slides on the linear axis. That also holds this load cell in the middle. That looks like an S. Wait. Like this, it looks like an S. And what that is doing is pretty much just measuring the force in between this part and this part. So you can use these pedals without any movement if you would want to. This is the load cell that measures the pressure on the pedal face, and that's the value that the game is getting. There's also this little metal part here. You can flip this around 180 degrees. There are 2 positions for the pedals. One has a little higher maximum pedal force and less travel. This is the configuration I'm using right now. And the other one has a little more travel and a little lower maximum pedal force. But I think the amount of travel you get with this is more than sufficient, so I haven't really bothered with it and left it in this default position. Then most of the adjustment is actually being done in software. That also is the cool thing about these pedals. I will show you everything in detail later in the rig. Then connectivity of the pedals. We do have some connector. I don't know what it's doing, to be honest. No idea. Power switch. Then we have 2 pedal connectors if you want to connect passive pedals to that. They have an adapter for Hosingwald pedals, for example. I haven't really tested this, but it seems to work fine from what I saw on the Discord with the feedback that was provided there. Then you have an Ethernet Simucube link output and 2 power connections. And the thing is, there are 2 connectors for power because you daisy chain the pedals. There's only one power supply that connects to the primary pedal. And then you go from the output here into the input of the next pedals. And even if you use 3 pedals, it's just using one power supply. Power consumption, by the way, is relatively low. It obviously depends on your configuration, but the highest I have seen is around 150 watts, and that was pressing both pedals with relatively high force, which is a very unrealistic scenario. But again, I'll show you the power consumption in the rig later. Overall, the build quality is pretty much perfect. There's nothing that I can criticize. Maybe this cable here, it would be nicer if it was integrated in the orange rod here. For me, it's not a big problem, but if you have, for example, pets that like to play with cables, this could become an issue, but that's pretty much the only thing that I can think of to criticize regarding build. It's typical Simucube quality, and I can really not criticize anything here. Mounting of the pedal, we have 6 holes here, 6 elongated holes. You can see it in the bottom here. So you can move it in this direction quite a bit. It's very easy to match this with conventional pedals, especially if you use the Simucube pedal plate, which is, by the way, pretty nice. Just make sure you install the heel rest in the correct orientation. Don't be like me and put it upside down. But the Simucube pedal mounts to the 2nd slot in the front, and then you have the 1st slot in the front where you can mount a regular throttle to it. And while the alignment might not be perfect, for example, with these pedals here, the throttle will be a little bit further away compared to the brake. But I typically set my pedals up like this anyway, so it's not a big deal for me. But in theory, you can mix and match. I would not be able to use a pedal set like this with 2 pedals that look completely different. That would trigger my OCD hard, so I'm really, really happy that Simucube announced that throttle pedal. I would love to check that out for you as well, so let's see, maybe I can get something from Simucube, and we'll cover that in a future video. I've also seen somebody stole the design from Simucube already and made like a little DIY version, but to be honest, the mechanical build is probably the easiest part of this. I mean, it's still like a very complex system, but the magic definitely is in the software. The software as of now, version 1.6.0, supports iRacing, Assetto Corsa Competizione, Live for Speed, Project Cars 1 and 2, and BeamNG. And that doesn't mean that other games will not work with these pedals, it's just the effects that you can use, like for example the traction control or ABS. They need to be supported by the telemetry output of the game. So if you want to play a game like the F1 game, for example, it will work perfectly fine with this. You will just not get the effects that you can get in the supported games. But I would say that's it for this part. I think we will hop into the rig now. I will explain everything in detail. I'm sorry there will be some redundancy with my first impression video because I want to cover everything in the review so you don't have to watch 2 different videos and then jump back and forth. So if you watch that, there will be some stuff that you've already heard. I'm sorry about that. But I just wanted to have everything in one place for people that are interested in these pedals. Let's hop into the rig. So the most important thing is the Simucube tuner software, which is a different software than what is being used on the Simucube 2. So 2 different softwares for both devices. I hope they will unify it in the future, but I think there are plans. But as of now, 2 different ones. The software needs to run while you are gaming, because otherwise you will not get the telemetry effects, because the software reads the telemetry from the game and then generates the effects that you can use on the pedals. So if you wonder why it doesn't work, make sure Simucube Tuner is running. I was wondering in the beginning, like sometimes the effects didn't work and I couldn't really figure out why. It needs to be running. So in the software there are several tabs here. The profiles, where you can manage all the profiles. It comes with a few. I'll show you some of them. Then you can configure your pedals. I have 2 connected, so it's brake and throttle for me. If you add a third one, you can do it here. There's the firmware update. And it will also show you the connection to the simulator if a game is running. So we'll start with the brake pedal here on my ACC profile. The first thing you need to do is go to the configure tab here and then set how this metal part is mounted. For me, it's in the high position. If yours is low, then, well, set it accordingly. You can increase or decrease the length of this orange rod thingy here, and then you can customize which setting you're using. I'm using default, which is high and short. And then here at the bottom, you can basically determine the 0 position of the pedals. So this is the position that is nearly the maximum to the front. But if you look at the camera here, if I go to 17, you see the pedal will be a little bit further in the back. But I like the brake to be relatively perpendicular with no angle on it. And that feels pretty good. So once you've set your settings here, go to save. It will do a little initialization and then you're good to go. Then the first part of the software is called pedal feel. And here you can configure, basically think of it like configuring the elastomer stack and the preload of a conventional pedal set. So as a brake, you can go linear. That will probably feel close to a brake pedal that is using a spring. Feels similar to me. You can have a square that is closer to, you know, think of an elastomer brake pedal with a little spring at the beginning that you can compress. So there's basically no resistance at the beginning and then it becomes progressively stiffer. You can use S-curve, which is basically the little spring at the beginning, then it gets harder and at the end it again will get a bit easier to press. You can do logarithmic. This is being used in a lot of the GT profiles. Not really for me, to be honest. Even more logarithmic curve and an even more logarithmic curve. But you don't have to use these presets, so I'll show you what all the sliders are doing. So let's start with the linear. Preload is pretty much self-explanatory. It's the preload that you need to apply to the brake before it starts moving. So I can set this to 40 kilogram. And you see I'm now pushing it with 30 kilogram or so, and the pedal does not really move a lot, just a tiny bit. And as soon as I go over this, it will start with a travel. I typically run relatively low preload because I like the sensitivity in the low areas to be relatively high. Might not be insanely realistic, but it's just like what I prefer. Then something that kind of goes into a similar direction is the 0% game input thingy here. So at the moment, the 0% would be at 2.53 kilogram. So that is the value from the preload here. So as soon as I go over the 2.53, it will output signal to the game. You can, in theory, add a dead zone here. I don't know why anyone would want to do that, but you can. Now, as soon as you go over the 2.5, the pedal will start moving. But you have to go to this point, which is 9.7 kilograms, until the pedals will send inputs to the game. Whether this really is a useful feature or not, I don't know. I can't think of anything why you would want to use this, but it's in there. If you want to use it, you can. But let's put this to 0, preload to like 3 kilograms. That feels pretty good to me. Then on the bottom you have the pedal travel adjustment. You can make this pedal with basically 0 travel, like 5 millimeter. You don't feel movement in the pedal. You can see it in the camera, but you can't feel it while pushing. This is probably closer to a prototype car, F1 car, that are supposed to have a very low travel. I personally do not like that setting at all. You can also go to the other extreme, 64. This is almost too much because the angle of the pedal at 64 millimeters becomes so flat that you almost slip off the brake pedal, especially if you drive with socks and maybe you don't have socks with some grippy material on it. What I typically do is around 40. That is quite a bit of travel. I like that. And I can highly recommend to try these things out. Do not listen to other people that say, hey, an F1 car has no travel, so it must be good. No. The beauty with these pedals is you can try everything out with a single click of your mouse, or technically 2 clicks. And don't be afraid to try all these extreme values yourself and see what works the best for you. Do not listen to marketing of other companies, just try it out. Okay, then on the right side you have the curve maximum force. It gets a little bit confusing here. I think Simucube can improve the UI here. It's, yeah, not ideal, but it's pretty much the maximum value of this graph here. So 150 kilograms, but you would think that if you press the brake with 150 kilograms, you would be here, but you cannot really move this part here. Or I just haven't figured out how to move it. I don't know. But this will now be at around 135 kilograms. I mean, don't get me wrong, 135, that will be enough for everyone. That's really hard to reach this. But the 150 is not this point. It's actually this point. So if you move this point here to 150, you can see that now we can go to 150 kilograms. And then only if I hit the 150, the game will be sent to 100%. It is a little bit confusing. You can also not go, for example, 80 kilograms here and then still 150 here, or you can, and I just haven't figured out how. There's some potential here for further improvements in terms of usability, but it is a very complex product. I totally get that. We are very early in the development cycle, and it only will get better and better with time. But just keep in mind, this is a little confusing here. Okay, then you also have these points here. You can move these wherever you want. Oops, that makes no sense. Let's just start with linear again. And you can basically, if you would want to make a curve like this, not that it makes any sense, but you could, then you feel these little mountains in the curve diagram, and not exactly useful for a brake, especially something like that, but it could be really, really cool when you use the pedals as a clutch to simulate a bite point or even like a dual bite. I don't know. I have no idea how a clutch in a real race car feels like, so I can only guess, but you can pretty much set this up to be whatever you want it to be. That is the cool thing. But let's say we want to have like a little S curve, then you would probably go with, I don't know, something like this. You can move these left, right, up, down. You can even go higher and then have it drop again. Whatever. You can do whatever you want with this. Then with this 100% game input slider, you can also go below the endpoint of the curve. And that feels more like a conventional pedal set. You know, think of a Helsingveld sprint pedal. You don't really know where 100% in the game is, so you just have to guess. And this is something that you can replicate by putting this relatively low. I personally don't think it's very useful. I prefer to have it basically at this point, so I know when I hit the end stop, I'm at 100%. But if you don't like that feeling, it's probably not super realistic, because real race cars probably don't have an end stop for the brake. But that's also the nice things about these pedals. You can either replicate the real race car as closely as possible if that is what you're after. I personally prefer to set up a brake so it gives me the biggest benefits for sim racing. And for me, that means I set the 100% game input to match this endpoint here at 72 kilograms for now. So I know when I hit the end stop, I know the game will see 100%. Very useful for ACC, for example. Probably less useful for iRacing, because you never really want to hit the 100% in that game. But you can do whatever you want. You probably get the idea with these pedals. It's just like the limit is pretty much your imagination. Okay, so that was the pedal feel. curve. I hope that wasn't too much in detail. Then we have damping. And what damping is doing, let's actually set this to very low force here. If I disable it, I can move the pedal very, very, very quickly. And if I add the damping, then it will... The quicker you move the pedal, the harder it gets to press in a way. And you can customize this on pressing and on release. So for example, if you want a brake that is super heavy to press when you press it quickly, then up this. I mean, 100% doesn't really make sense. But you can see it here. If I push this, it goes over 100 kilograms and then settles at something lower in the end, 90. Okay. But this is what the damping is doing. It adds some resistance when you push the pedal. And the same thing goes for releasing, only that it slows down the release of the pedal. So for example, if you look at the pedal camera now, it's at 100%. This is 13%, so easy to press, but if I release it, it will only slowly release. Can help with the trail braking, especially if you go to really high values, but also do not overdo it with the damping, because otherwise your pedal will just become very slow, and in situations where you want to have a quick pedal, this will not be ideal. So what I typically use is a little bit of damping when pressing, a little more damping when releasing, but again, play around with these settings. It is really cool that you can customize both directions individually. I didn't think I would like this feature that much, but I think it's an insanely nice feature. Okay, then friction. My recommendation is, at the moment, software version 1.6, do not use friction. It just feels broken. I don't know what it's supposed to simulate. It just kind of feels as if your pedal isn't smooth anymore and it's sticky, and yeah, it's just not good. So friction, I would recommend to disable. I cannot really explain you what it's supposed to do. No idea. Okay, then we have the simulator input mapping. We have the force input range, which is exactly these two curves here. So you can either move these here, or if I move this to 26, for example, then you will see this is reflected here as well. So this is a little bit redundant. And then we have the linear or curve mapping to the game. So linear mapping means I have a maximum input of 33 kilograms here, so that is mapped to 100%. If I go to half of that, I have about 17, 18 kilograms to send half or 50% brake input to the game. And if you go to curve mapping, you can customize these curves. And this is pretty much, if you know the curve mappings of other pedals, it would be this here. Because this is basically to make the force to game input ratio nonlinear. It can help to have a logarithmic curve here, especially if you struggle a little bit with trail braking, because on release on the brake, my problem has always been that I released the brakes a bit too quickly. So my brake trace would fall off the mountain, and that is not good if you want to be quick. And if you set this to a logarithmic value here, it pretty much counters this bad habit of dropping the brake too quickly. But to be completely honest, with these pedals, especially on ABS cars, they helped a lot to improve my trail braking, and I don't really use the curve mapping that much anymore. I still run a slightly nonlinear curve here, but I think soon I will just go to linear. Okay, then the next thing is this preset maximum slider here. You can limit your game output to whatever you want. I wouldn't really recommend to use tricks like this on a pedal set like this. It's better to train your muscle memory and do not use this kind of stuff. But if you want to, set this to, for example, iRacing GT3 80-85%, and then click one of the presets here and it will adjust this point and still give you a linear curve. You can also grab this here. By the way, does that mean... Oh, you can move this point here actually. I've just not been... Yeah, okay, maybe increase the clickable range here, because I was always clicking here and then I thought I couldn't move it. But you can move this part if you want to. Okay, well, same thing here. 85%, and then you can do whatever you want. Not really a useful curve here, but okay. I would recommend set this to 100% and then go with linear or one of the logarithmic presets, or just go with linear mapping. Okay, before we hop onto the effects, I want to show you one last thing. If you want to implement something like a two-stage braking that many pedals use, and that is really, really useful in my opinion for iRacing, for example, GT3s, to get that 85 at the end stop. It's pretty much the following that you can do. Either you set this to really, really high values and then you move this point close to the end and just have a really, really strong incline here. That way you will not have a hard stop, but well, close to that. You can make it, the steeper this increase here, the harder it feels. But the other way would be, again, set this to your desired maximum curve force and then move this point lower, adjust the other points accordingly. And then you have a hard stop here, like a really hard feeling stop that maps to 82%, for example, but you can then still panic brake over that. So these are the two possibilities to realize something like that if you want to use it. I still think the UI could use some more refinement, but it's fine. If I hit the 80% here, I can really feel an end stop. If I do it like this, it feels much smoother. So these are the two different approaches here. Try them out, see what you like better if you want to implement something like a two-stage braking system. Okay, then we have the effects. You obviously need to run one of those games that I mentioned earlier that have telemetry effect support. And you have three different things. You have motor vibration, ABS, and traction control. Very quickly, motor vibration basically lets you feel the current RPM the car is on the pedal. This is a noisy effect because all these effects are haptic feedback. And if you have some RPM modulated onto your pedal, you will hear that. That's just physics. You cannot avoid that. Maybe if you have the perfect isolation, you can make it less audible. But if you use motor vibration on haptic feedbacks, on a Buttkicker, on pedals, on a D-box, it's just noisy. It's the most noisy haptic feedback that I can think of. Maybe driving over curbs comes kind of close to that. But if you use the motor vibration, it will be a little loud. Keep that in mind. Then you can customize the frequency multiplier. If it's set to 1, then the RPM will be directly modulated onto the pedals. If you want lower frequencies, lower this slider. If you want higher, well, you get the idea. Then vibration intensity is basically the amplitude of the vibration. The higher it is, the more you can feel the RPM. And then you can also fine-tune this, whether low RPM or high RPM should be more noticeable on the pedal. I personally do not really like motor vibration effects in general, whether it's on the pedals or on a Buttkicker or on the D-box. I have that disabled, but it's here if you want to use it. Just try it out and see if you like it. Then the best thing in the world, the ABS effect. 3 settings, frequency. The game does not output the frequency that the cars are doing. It just tells the pedal, hey, ABS is active right now, and then you can customize the frequency of that ABS stuttering in the software in between 5 and 25 Hertz. I like something around 19. Feels pretty good to me. No idea what real race cars are using, but this feels high enough that I can feel it, and it's still low enough that it doesn't have such a big impact on the brake trace. Then the intensity, again, is more like the amplitude. So if you want to feel it more noticeably, then go higher. I think 20% is a good sweet spot. And then smoothness is kind of how heavy these impacts are that you feel on the pedal. Just play with the slider. It's kind of hard to describe. It's something that you just need to try out what you prefer there. Then, well, traction control is kind of like ABS, just with the traction control. Obviously makes no sense on the brake here. Then I would say, before we hop to the throttle, I will quickly configure this as a clutch. Now we would not have any brake pedal, just the clutch and throttle. The clutch with exactly the same settings as the brake makes no sense. So let's quickly load one of the profiles here, Simucube generic rally. And then you can see at this point, it feels like there's the bite point of the clutch. I don't know. So it will get easier to press in this area. And this is just simulating a not super hard end stop. So this is irrelevant. As you can see here, the game input is limited at 24 millimeters. The clutch is using the travel, not the force. So these dead zone sliders are on this axis now. But it feels pretty realistic to a regular road car. The last time I've driven a road car with the clutch is, well, it's 2-3 years ago. But it feels realistic. Maybe the travel compared to my old BMW would be too low. But that's just one click away and now you have a crazy amount of travel. Some of the settings will require some more fine-tuning from Simucube. For example, if I set this to 63, I don't know if you can hear it in the microphone, but it will Yeah, you probably cannot hear it. But it's like the controller, I don't know if this is a PID controller or something, is oscillating. So here I have vibrations even though there shouldn't be any. If I reduce this, it's gone. So we are still relatively early in the development cycle. These things will probably be evened out if Simucube gets more time to refine everything. Just keep in mind, sometimes there are some effects that is just like the system that is oscillating a little bit. But yeah, clutch. I don't want to talk too much about the clutch. You can still enable effects like motor vibration and traction control on the clutch. I haven't tried it because I only have 2 pedals. I don't really know what to do with the clutch anyways. If Simucube will send one of those passive throttles over, I will probably try a 3-pedal setup with an active clutch and a passive throttle. But for now, same customizability and everything. You can do whatever you want. And everybody should probably be able to configure the clutch to whatever they prefer, because it's just so flexible in all the adjustability. Okay, let's set this back as a brake pedal. It's interesting that it saves the configuration from the pedal before and does not go to the brake preset from the profile. But let's go to my ACC profile. Okay. See, this is what I like on ACC. A slight increase in force at the end, but still relatively low braking pressure. I only need 55 kilograms or so to go to 100%. But it feels good on ACC to me because you want to hit the 100% in that game and then trail off. But more on that later when we hop into the game, actually. If we go to throttle, you get the idea. You have exactly the same options as in the brake and clutch. Again, this is a travel measurement, not a force measurement. So the dead zone is on this axis here. This is the travel, this is the force. And then you can do whatever you want. You can have a throttle pedal with 117 kilograms. I wouldn't recommend, but if that is what you want to do, you can. I like to run a relatively high force for the throttle. I mean, 15 kilograms is not a lot, but it's still more than what any passive, or not any, but most of the passive pedals will give you as the maximum throttle stiffness option. It helps me to not thunderfoot out of the corners. As usual, my recommendation is always try it out yourself. I know it's hard with sim racing gear to try it out yourself, but if you know anyone or you have maybe a store nearby that has these, I can highly recommend to try them out because it is a very, I hate to use that word, but it is a very game-changing experience to use these pedals. But then again, dead zone at the 0, dead zone at the 100% game output. You have the preload adjustment. I don't really use a lot of dead zone here. It's set to 0.2 millimeters, but I guess I wouldn't even notice a difference whether this was at 0 or 0.2, because most of the dead zone that I feel is coming from the preload. Then the travel I prefer is around 40, 45 for the throttle. Again, you can have a 5mm throttle pedal if you like that. Or you can have tons of travel, like for example, the GT3 profile from Morad. Let's actually quickly load that. Uses the full travel, also super, super low maximum force. To me, this doesn't really feel good, but if that's how a Merc GT3 feels like, okay. He also has tons of travel on the brake, by the way, 60 millimeters, and then a very low force. To me, that's a little bit too much because the problem that I will nearly slip off the brake pedal. But okay, let's go back to the throttle here. You have the same options, damping for pressing and releasing. I like to use this opposite direction to me than on the brake. I prefer to have a little bit more dampening when I press the throttle because you don't want to smash on the throttle from 0 to 100% in the game. That's not the quickest way. You want to apply throttle a bit smoother, and the damping helps me to achieve that. And then on release, I have the damping lower. Just feels the best to me. Friction again just feels strange. I don't know. I don't know what their intention is with friction. I would recommend to just ignore that part. I mean, try it out, but it's weird. Then we have the simulator input mapping. Again, I use a linear mapping here, but you can use curves, whatever. Create your custom curves for the game output. Feel free to play around with that. And then for the effects, we have motor vibration. Same thing as on the brake. I don't like it, so I have it disabled. And then you have traction control. Initially, I didn't really like the traction control, but especially on ACC, especially on ACC, on iRacing, it just doesn't work because we don't have traction control telemetry output on iRacing. But on ACC, it can help to not go on throttle too quickly at the corner exit. And what I have noticed is that it is especially helpful on worn tires, because the more your tires wear down, the earlier this traction control effect will come into play. And it just lets you feel the tire wear, and I thought that was very cool and helps you to not go on throttle too quickly. Really, really cool effects. I guess there's more to come when the team at Simucube has more time to develop effects. But looking at my script here, I posted in the YouTube community tab whether people have questions, and there was a question, actually a few, about noise, heat and power consumption. Noise, the pedals are louder than pretty much any other pedal set that I've tried, because they feel, especially on the throttle, because you use such a low force, they feel a little bit grainy. It's the first time you go on the throttle, you feel like, what? It feels a bit strange. You completely, once you start using these pedals, you don't notice this, but it's not as smooth as just a regular spring-based VRS pedal, for example. You will feel a little bit of grittiness, a little bit of sandpaper feeling when you go on the throttle. But again, it's not really an issue. It's something that you notice when you first go on the throttle. But once you're driving, you're completely not noticing that anymore, at least for me. Maybe for some people that are super, super sensitive, they will notice that. Maybe for those people, the passive throttle is a better idea. For me, this is fine, but it's just not as smooth as a spring-based pedal. Then heat. I touched the servo motors after a long stream, and they maybe were a tiny bit warm, but very, very negligible. The Simucube 2 base gets much hotter when you use high force feedback, so heat is, I would say, not really existent. Then power consumption, we'll just have a look at this. So if you go to this Simucube pedals active power, in the idle without me pressing the pedals, it's consuming about 18 watts. And then the consumption is pretty much just depending on how hard you have the pedals set up. Because let's say you press the brake to the virtual end stop. This is not a hard mechanical end stop. It's the servo motor basically stops moving and you press against the servo motor, and the more you press, the more the servo motor has to work to get you to that end stop and the more power it consumes. If you set your pedals to 150 kilograms, the power consumption will be higher than if you set them to 60 kilograms. I think the highest I've seen here, it can go over 100, but if I press both really hard, which is not a really realistic use case, but you see this will increase. We're at 73 watts now. It's not a super, super quick reading, so we'll have to maintain it for a bit. Where are we right now? Pressing with 110 kilograms on the brake and 70 on the throttle, and that is about 70 watts of power. Actually just updated to 97. It was with the two pedals, and now it will drop to 18 for the standby again. It's not a very, very fast reading, but I've monitored this, and I think the highest I've seen in really, really excessive force scenarios was 120, 130 watts, but that is with pressing both pedals. And yeah, overall, if we look at the summation delivered, this is, I think, from about 1.5 to 2 weeks of driving. So maybe say this is 20 hours of driving. The power consumption is relatively low. We have 0.6 kilowatt hours from the pedals. For example, for comparison, the Simucube 2 was at 0.4. But if you look at your gaming PC, this used 14 kilowatt hours. So it definitely uses more power than a passive pedal set, because that just uses the USB power and that's it. But I was actually surprised how little power these pedals consume. It's just 18 watt in idle is a little bit much, I think. So make sure to turn the pedals off once you're done with driving. Can highly recommend Home Assistant and smart plugs for that. All I have to do is click this and then the pedals are off. Keep in mind, you always have to actively start the pedals. So every time you boot your PC, you need to go here, click on Start Devices, and then you can see it on the camera. The pedals will initialize. This is actually a safety requirement for machines. No way to go around that. It can be a little bit, I don't really want to say annoying. It's just another step that you have to take. But like in a sim racing PC, you have to do 2,000 things anyways when you boot it up. So yeah. Just keep in mind that this is a thing that's necessary. But yeah, power consumption, I'll show you the curve reading later with everything on the rig, but it is very, very low. Your gaming PC and your monitors will definitely consume more power than these pedals. But I would say we'll actually hop into a game here and talk a little bit how the pedals feel, if they make you quicker, how all the effects feel. We'll start with ACC, we'll also have a look at iRacing, but I think the implementation of the ABS is just so much better on ACC that I want to start with this game. Alright, we are in the Lambo Evo 2 at Suzuki. Let's start the car. I hope that is not too loud. It is actually pretty loud. Let's make it a bit quieter. In the end, this should not be a review about how great ACC sounds, but it's focused on the pedals. So let's drive out of the pits. And now I can already feel that TC effect. It's pretty much the moment you see the LEDs here in the game. Oh god, need to get used to the D-box with the microphone. The moment you see the LEDs for TC and ABS is the moment that you feel all these effects in the pedals. Wait, let me actually give you a little telemetry overlay here. Okay, that should be better to see what the pedals are doing here. But you feel you're way more connected to the car. That's the best way to describe it. And especially the traction control is nice, especially on older tires, because you will feel when you need to be more careful on throttle and everything. And it's kind of like very immersive to be able to feel a difference between worn tires and fresh tires, to be honest. But the ABS is something that will help you, at least to become more consistent. The whole question, does it make you quicker? I think that's a difficult one. I can tell you, in my case, I think it made me quicker. Obviously, I cannot do any scientific measurements here. I did a little bit of hot lapping without the ABS effect enabled and with the ABS effect enabled. And there were like 2/3 difference between running with the effect and running without the effect. But that is not necessarily because of the effect itself. I think it is because it teaches me better trail braking. And I will explain you why. I think it was Daniel Morat that said in a GT3 car you brake as hard as you can till you start feeling the ABS. And then you trail off so you do not feel the ABS. And that is exactly what you can do with these pedals. Let me put this to a very extreme level because I don't know if you will be able to see it in the camera, but that will be the best chance. So let's go to the brake and just go to intensity really, really high and low smoothness. You will probably see it in the pedal traces now. Okay, if we drive now. Can you see that on the camera? It's hard to see, but you can see it in the pedal traces because the jitters on the pedal trace is the effect. So another question that I got was, will you see it in the game? Let's put it like this. If you use insanely high values that do not even feel very well, you will see it. If you use very low effect intensity, you will see it as well, but it becomes negligible. I don't think it will have a big impact on your brake performance, but the trace cannot be as smooth as without the effect. I think Simucube mentioned that they do some filtering to get rid of some of that, but a trail-off will definitely not look as smooth with the ABS running very high compared to with it disabled. Just keep that in mind. But why it made me quicker is simply because I can feel how I'm supposed to trail off the brakes. Like, I try to go off the brakes so I do not trigger the ABS. And my problem has always been, I mean, look at this brake trace now. It's relatively nice. It's still like, with the effect so high, it's kind of hard to do. But my problem has always been that my brake trace looks more like this. I go full on the brakes and then will go off the brakes relatively quickly. So the initial trail off from, let's say, 100 to 90% is okay. But then as soon as I'm approaching the corner and getting closer to that, I will just drop off the brakes too quickly. And with these pedals, I kind of focus more on feeling that ABS effect, or in not feeling that ABS effect in the trail off. So as soon as I start feeling it, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but it's so hard to explain. As soon as I start feeling it, I will just trail off, so the effect goes away. And it's not something that you actively think about. My braking points are not ideal here. It just becomes somewhat muscle memory. It's not that I'm in the braking zone and I'm like, okay, where's the effect? Now it's here, a little less brake pressure. It just becomes something that you will automatically do. And if you forget to start the software, so you do not get the effects, like that happened to me, and I was like, something feels different. Like it feels weird. I couldn't really tell what it was. I mean, if I thought about the effects, yeah, pretty clear the effects were not running. But it just felt not natural to me anymore, and this is probably a good indication of how easily this gets into your muscle memory. And I think with pedal reviews, it's always kind of difficult. I think you need to be somewhat a decent driver to be able to properly judge the potential a brake has. And I was watching the review from Pablo. Pablo, I think he's a very, very good iRacing driver, esport level. And he said the pedals didn't really make him quicker, but more consistent. I mean, in the end, more consistent also is quicker over a race. But I do think whether they make you quicker or not depends a little bit on why you are slow. If your braking is really, really good, but you drive the wrong lines, the pedals will not make you quicker. If you struggle, if you have a bad habit with your trail braking, that the pedals will emphasize because of the ABS effect, then they can make you quicker. I really think, in my case, it made me a bit quicker. I see it in my ratings on ACC, for example. It skyrocketed quite a bit since using these pedals. I mean, I also played it way more, so that probably has another impact as well. It is hard to measure. The only thing that I tested was drive without the ABS, drive with the ABS afterwards, and I was quicker with the ABS, and I was slower again with the ABS disabled. But that's not a scientific test. I'm not saying like, buy these pedals and you will be insanely quick. It could be that you will get slower with them initially because they feel different. Or if your braking is really, really good already, then it probably will not help at all. But this is a very individual thing. Some people,
stay away from curbs.
For some people it will help, for some people it won't. It definitely feels very immersive. If you want to compare the ABS effect to rumble motors or to haptic feedback on a brake, I've tested that Nayam Syntec brake with pretty much a Buttkicker mounted to the brake. It can give you a similar effect, as in you feel when the car uses the ABS, but it's not even close if I compare it. I would say rumble motors are probably the worst implementation of that. I think a Buttkicker is doing the job better, but how the pedal kind of fights back against you, like in the Simucube Active Pedal, I think it's impossible to match with rumble motors or a Buttkicker on your brake pedal. But they can give a similar effect that you feel once the ABS is active. But if this was a 10 out of 10, I would rate the rumble feedback a 4 and the Buttkicker maybe a 5, 5.5 or something. It's not even close, but it can give you something that is kinda comparable, but also not. Does that make any sense? I find that so hard to explain. You need to try it to understand how these pedals feel. Okay, another question was, can the pedal force recreate the G-force of the body onto the brake like IRL? As of now, no. But I guess it would be possible to simulate that in the future. I don't really think that would be very good though, because it will make your inputs less precise. And then another very good question I got was, is it pay to win? Difficult. In the end, better gear will most likely make you quicker in a way that you probably will have more fun using it. I think that is the biggest aspect of the whole, does something make you quicker or not? But I would say pay to win, it is comparable to a direct drive. A direct drive will make you more consistent. It can make you quicker in some cases. The same with these pedals. But there will still be a lot of aliens that will slap you with a G25 clamped to the desk and pedals that probably don't even work properly. I think in the end, if something gives you more joy and more fun, then you will drive more and that will make you quicker. But I think we will hop onto iRacing now and we'll also try a car without ABS there. For that, I will load my iRacing profile, which is different than the ACC profile. I run a higher maximum brake force here, because then the force that I used on ACC, which was around 50, 55 or so, maps to 85 for iRacing, and you probably get it. iRacing GT3, you want to be at around 85% brake input. So using this profile actually makes the braking feel very similar, only that I hit the 85% here instead of the 100%, but I can then still panic brake over it. I will probably adjust this so I don't have too much travel left at the end, but to be honest, I haven't really played a lot of iRacing recently, so this is just pretty much the profile from my initial impressions. Alright, same track, different car though. This time we'll drive the Merc AMG. And on iRacing, it feels very, very similar. The only difference is there's no traction control effect on iRacing, so you do not feel when you use the traction control in the throttle. You still feel the ABS, but I find it a bit less drastic, the difference, compared to ACC, because I don't, please no discussions in the comments about realism and everything. I just find the ABS implementation on iRacing a little bit weird. So ABS starts triggering at around 80-85% or so, but fundamentally you still do the same thing. You trail off when you start feeling the ABS because you do not want to use it. Also on ACC you don't really want to use the ABS, but on iRacing you especially don't want to use the ABS because apparently it overheats the tires or something. But you can use the feeling of the ABS to trail off the brakes. I have maybe played 5 hours of iRacing since I got these pedals, so not a lot, and especially not a lot in cars that have ABS. But I think here the same principle applies. If you struggle with your trail braking, then this effect can help you in a car that has the ABS. I mean, my brake traces now look a little bit catastrophic here. But fundamentally, it's very, very similar to the ACC implementation. I just kind of find that feeling that you hit an end stop at 100% and then wait for the ABS to trigger and then trail off feels a bit more natural to me, but again, I don't really know if it's more realistic or anything. It's kind of a shame that we do not get the traction control output here, but I also kind of do understand why some of these games do not give out that data to their telemetry channels, because you can probably use these kind of informations to create software that helps with your throttle input to the game. But yeah, on iRacing it feels also good, just not as good as on ACC. But I think the more interesting thing is what happens if you drive a car that does not have ABS. For that we will hop in the Formula car, we'll probably do Suzuki as well, and also try some of these provided profiles. Okay, while we wait for this to load, I'll show you the profile tab here and the included profiles. We have an ACC profile. I don't even know what that is. Probably, yeah, I don't know. 37 kilograms and a very, very low travel. That will not work for me, but there are some presets in here. Throttle very, very light. I do wish they would put in more profiles geared towards sim racing. There's a lot of stuff that is supposed to emulate a GT3 car, a rally car, an F1 car, F4. I totally get that in a way that these pedals can basically be anything, and for people that want the highest immersion that is possible, this is a good thing. I personally am more after a profile that is geared towards sim racing. I guess if a real race car had an ActivePedal and the driver could customize it to their liking, I don't think that two drivers would share the same profile, because you can just get better brake performance by tweaking the pedal to whatever works the best for you, whether it is no travel, super high force, or super high force and a lot of travel, something that is really hard to replicate with conventional elastomer-based pedals, for example, or whether it's something in between. I just wish there were more profiles geared towards sim racing. For example, an iRacing profile with a hard end stop at 85%, where you can still brake over that, but you can basically get that end stop muscle memory point to know how much you're supposed to brake, stuff like that. It's cool that they have all these real profiles in here, but for example, this new F1 profile I don't know, it just doesn't really work for me. It's 117 kilograms for the maximum brake, and then it also limits at 83. Why? I don't like what? It's, yeah. I find these profiles just not insanely useful. Let's put it like that. I guess it is probably made for one of the iRacing cars because 83% sounds like iRacing. Let's just try it out in the W13 here. Oh my god, that throttle is light. Oh, and motor vibration enabled. Oh god, everything vibrates. But to answer the question, oh my god, I wouldn't be able to drive this. This is interesting. I don't know how people can drive pedals with no travel. It just does not work for me. But to answer that question, how does the pedals feel when you drive a car that has no ABS and you lock up? Well, the answer is very simple. You feel nothing when the car locks up. That apparently is realistic. Real race car drivers say that you do not feel a lock-up in pedals. They do not necessarily think that it needs to be in the sim as well, because you have limited amounts of inputs to feel what the car is doing. But okay, if this is how it is in real life, I think we should not really complain about it. But it would be nice to have like an effect similar to the ABS that just like, holy shit, the D-box is... You can feel how much stiffer this car is compared to a GT3. Interesting. I need to make a video about the D-box. But I personally wish there was an effect that maybe somehow gives you a slight vibration in the brake when you lock up the tires or something. So if you drive mainly cars without any ABS, then this is just a very good pedal set. And I don't mean that in any negative way. This is the best pedal set that I personally have ever used, and I tried a lot, and I think at that price it better be the best pedal set. You can freaking feel the porpoising of this car. That's crazy. But yeah, no fancy effects if you don't drive anything that has no ABS. No traction control. The only effect that I feel right now is the motor vibration. That I actually think is a little bit annoying for this car. But apart from that, it's just like any other pedal set, with the difference that it's super easy to tweak. With one click you can go from this crazy stiff F1 profile to a rally car profile with a lot of travel. You can adjust the damping on pressing, on release. If you don't use any of the effects, then I think it's just a really, really, really exceptionally well-made pedal set. And with that being said, let's go to the verdict. I'll just keep driving a little bit while talking about it. Should you buy these? Let's put it like this. If buying them does not hurt you financially in a way that you have to think about it for months, absolutely. Go and buy these. The pedals are insanely good. There's nothing that comes close to this. A conventional pedal set with vibration or haptic feedback can get you in that range a little bit, but it's not even close in my opinion. The adjustability and ease of setup with these pedals is the biggest thing here in my opinion. The effects are nice, but the fact that you can so easily tweak it to your liking, and it also helps you to explore what you actually like. Because let's be honest, you buy pedals, you mount them under your rig, well not under, you mount them under your monitors and everything. It is a pain to adjust them. And I guess many of us probably do not really explore all the potential they have on their pedal set and in their driving in the end, because you need a pedal set that suits your personal preference. And if adjustability is such a pain, then you will probably lose a little bit of performance there because you're just not doing that. And with the Simucube pedals, there's no excuse. It's so easy to customize. I personally explored and found out that I like a ton of travel, that I actually do not really need a lot of brake pressure. It just comes in many other conventional pedal sets. If you want high travel, You also need high force because otherwise you have the soft elastomers and then they become very squishy after some time. It's just not an ideal match. But with the Simucube pedals, everything is just a few clicks away. The damping, I never really thought that I will like damping on a brake pedal. I always thought on a throttle it's pretty cool, yeah, nice. On the brake, it's actually more useful and a really good helper to become more consistent and everything. So I think the pedals are absolutely great. Oh my god. Apparently it does not stop you from spinning. Man, that is wild. I think the pedals are insanely great. I can highly recommend them. It took me 4 or 5 hours of using them to find out I will buy the throttle as well. I think the biggest game changer, I hate that word, but the biggest game changer definitely is the brake with the effects and the adjustability. I also think the throttle is nice. If you can only afford one, definitely the brake is the most important pedal. Maybe pair it with the passive throttle from Simucube if it will be good. I expect it will be good, but maybe we'll find that out in a later review. But I personally also like the throttle pedal, but it's definitely not such a must-have as the brake. And I mean, even the brake, it's not a must-have. It's not like every other pedal now becomes obsolete, and if you do not have these pedals, you basically should better stop to sim race. No. All the other pedals are still great. I think on an esports level, this will not make you quicker. It's like motion. Motion feels awesome and immersive. Does it make you quicker? No. I think it's the same with these effects. If you're really at the top of the level, you know how to brake properly. If you're somewhat below the top level, still above average, like me for example, I think it can help you, especially if your braking habits are not ideal. If you're a medium skilled driver, it's hard to predict. It really depends on how much your braking sucks. If it sucks a lot, if your trail braking is not ideal, then these pedals can help you learn how to properly trail brake. But everything is so highly independent of the individual person that it's hard to say buy these pedals and you will be 17 seconds a lap quicker. That's just not how it goes with anything in sim racing. But I absolutely had tons of fun with these pedals. I can highly recommend them. I will recommend to join the Simucube Discord if you have any questions, because the Simucube team is really active there. They are really quick with updates to the pedals. There were some quirks in the beginning, some people that had weird oscillations, and I had 0 problems with my pedals, but from what I could see there was that the support was really good. They were really active there. They fixed stuff relatively quickly. I heard there's still some problems in heel and toe configurations. I couldn't really test that because one, I can't heel and toe. That would just be a no. And well, I only have 2 pedals and I could mount a passive throttle, but yeah, it's just a clutch. I don't really know what to do with it, to be honest. I use it when I spin, so that's about it. But yeah, to sum it all up, you probably already understood that I'm absolutely amazed by these pedals. I think it's so cool that finally, a manufacturer did something new and unique in the pedal world. It's not just another load cell pedal set. It is pretty steep in price, but you're paying for a pioneering product here. It is a completely new technology for pedals, and this stuff just is more expensive. When the first direct drives came out, they were expensive as well. If you have any other questions, like I said, either join the Simucube Discord and ask there, or join my Discord. Feel free to post a comment down below and ask. I'll try to answer everything that I can. And if you liked the video, maybe give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel to not miss any future videos. And yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Bye bye.